My father, literally on July 4th this year, passed away, and he was 98. And so in fairness, perhaps there are some good genes that are involved in that process, but one of the things that made my dad so outstanding was his mindset, how he thought. And so I'm going to give you two or three things about 73, and it's, by the way, it's a very good age. It's a, you know, I have valued all of my years, but I love where I am right now. I think every age has a real plus side to it if you really maximize it. And, there are four things when I look at 73 and where I am and what I'm able to do. And one of them would be intentional living. I think many people are not intentional in their life. Many people, they kind of accept their life instead of lead it. And I'm very passionate. In fact, I wrote a book called Intentional Living. I'm very passionate about living a life of which you make choices in your life that are going to really be an asset to you. One of my mentors was John Wooden, as you know. And he was a brilliant leader and a great coach. And he would say to me often, there's a choice you have to make in everything you do. So keep in mind that in those choices, the choices make you. And what I discovered is it's a fact that if you're intentional and you look at life, growing older is automatic, getting better is not. And there are people that are 73 and they automatically got here, but they weren't intentional. And because they weren't intentional, their life lacks what I would call meaning, fulfillment, significance. And I've really made it a habit to understand that the choices I make and the intentional, turning good intentions into good actions. So often, again, people just live a life of good intentions, and it's always someday. One of these days really becomes none of these days. It's just a matter of one day waking up and realizing, one of these days never happened. And I think so many times we just kind of assume, tomorrow has an incredible way of sneaking up on us until all of a sudden, you say, wow, it's here and I didn't do what I needed to do and didn't make the choices and take the actions I needed to make. So I think intentional living, that I wrap into that, being intentional in my personal growth, be intentional in trying to find and fulfill my purpose in life. All of that I would put into that area of intentional living. I think another thing that allows a person to grow older better. In fact, I often say I want to die old at a ripe young age, and so one of the things I think that makes it better for us is, or for me, is anticipation. When people ask me, how did you write over 80 books? And we have 7 companies in the John Maxwell enterprise, and I get up 5:30 every morning, 5 to 5:30, and I start my writing. And people say, well, you must be very self-disciplined. And I share with them, really, Ismail, that no, I'm not that self-disciplined. I'm just full of anticipation. And what that does for me is that awakens me. I anticipate that when I sit down and literally take my legal pad and my 4-color pen, because that's how I write. I still write Neanderthal. And, I can hardly wait to write because my whole purpose in life is to add value to people. So while I'm writing, I'm anticipating who's going to read this, who's going to benefit from this, good decisions that are going to be made because of this. And so it's anticipation that not only gets me up in the morning, it's anticipation that keeps me going. And I think that the moment we lose that exciting edge about our life, that we no longer anticipate. And by the way, anticipation will always disappoint. Now, this is a very important point that in fact, I've never even taught it, but it's coming to me right now. Anticipation is very unfulfilling if everything you anticipate benefits you personally. So if I'm anticipating perhaps that somebody's going to be good to me, or somebody's going to be nice to me, or somebody's, I'm going to reap something wonderful, that anticipation is very short-lived. But the anticipation of adding value to others, serving others, making other people's lives better, it's expansive. Whenever I get into thinking of others, my world expands. When I begin to think about myself, my world begins to contract. And I think that when people get older, that one of the big issues and problems is that their world begins to contract. It gets smaller instead of bigger. And it begins to get smaller because it's all about them. And if it's all about me, there's just going to be an incredible amount of lost opportunities and disappointments in my life. But if it's about others, then, there's a sense of look what I'm doing and look who I'm helping. And so anticipation is really, it's a better word to me than self-discipline. Self-discipline is almost like, okay, I get up at 5:30 in the morning, but here's the difference. Self-discipline is I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. Got a lot of work to do. Anticipation is I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I can hardly wait to get to my work. And so I think that my life has been a very exciting life because it's been filled with anticipation, but it's not about anticipation about my life being better. It's about me making other people's lives better. So if you put intentional living with anticipation and then relationships, I think relationships are essential. I have great friends. And I have people, in fact, I just finished right before I came here to the studio to be with you and Community Health Group. I was at a 2-hour meeting with some of my team, and we were discussing all the good things that are happening in the organization. And I'm thinking to myself, it's wonderful to make a difference, but it's even more wonderful to make a difference with people you love, and with people that you really care for, and with people that really care for me. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem very fulfilling for me to cross the finish line by myself, or to have a victory or a win by myself. I don't know. I mean, who do you celebrate with? I want to celebrate with people I care for. And so relationships, I think, play a very vital, integral part in my life that brings tremendous fulfillment. I mean, I just have people that, I love them and they love me, and we do it together, and we enjoy adding value to each other, helping each other, and giving each other the credit for it. So relationships make the age of 73 worth fulfilling. And then, Simon Sinek wrote a great book. I don't know if you've read it, Ismail, but if you haven't, and you that are listening to me, he wrote a book called The Infinite Game. And Simon is a good friend, and it's just a phenomenal book. And basically, it's a book about the fact that there are some people that they play a finite game. And if they play a finite game, it evolves them, and it started when they started, and it ends when they end. And there's kind of like a finish line. And I don't believe that is true. I believe that we play an infinite game. I don't think there is a finish line. And in fact, let me put it this way. For some people, if you have a finish line, when you cross it, you finished. You're finished. It's over. And I think a lot of people get to my age, and they've crossed their finish line. They had a retirement time. They set deadlines, and they made endings. The book's over, and at that moment, I think they lose that incredible energy that they could have used to continue on. But they stopped, and when you stop, all of a sudden, it's what I call advanced attraction. That once I know who I am, and once I know what I want, if I start moving, that all of a sudden I begin to attract all these positive things that allow me to fulfill the vision I have. Just as if I'm not moving, all the resources, all the opportunities, they begin to fade away. And I say, wow, why am I not getting opportunities? Well, it's because, you stop moving. I was at a friend's birthday party last night, really a good friend. And so he was giving, some of his favorite quotes of mine. And he said, I think my all-time favorite one is that, we're supposed to leave footprints in the sands of time. And he said, most people, they leave butt prints in the sands of time. They're, and when you play an infinite game, there are no butt prints to it. It's continually moving, and that finish line is, it's never going to be, you're never going to reach it. I'm never, when I came into this world, the game had already started. When I leave this world, the game is going to continue. And so there's no finish line. So I think if you put those four things together, I think if you put, my intentional living, my sense of anticipation, my wonderful friends and relationships that I built, I play an infinite game. At 73, it's a good age. And those are not all, but those are four, I think, essential core ingredients in my life that allows me to love right where I am right now.
So I thought I would share with you a practice that I have in my own life. It's a practice I've done now for over 20 years. The last week of the year, I set it aside just for time of reflection, prayer, and reevaluating my year. And then I take my calendar and I literally go over my calendar, not only day by day, but hour by hour. Every day I go every hour, and this is the person I met there, and this is what I was doing here. And as I go through the calendar, I just keep my legal pad beside me, and I write down things like, wow, that was a good day. This I didn't do well here. I would like to have a do-over here. Do you ever have times when you want to have a do-over? And I put things in different categories. Times where I really sensed that there was a real blessing of God on my life. The times when I felt that I was living too much for myself. And I mean, I go through it really takes me the week. I just evaluate it. One of the things I do is I take every special thing that Margaret and I did during that year, and I put it together. And then one night during that week, I pull her aside for dinner, and I sit down with my list, and I go through everything we did all year that was very special. And it's a time for me to reflect. It's a time for me to evaluate, to look at my year. And it's from that I form my next year, as far as I put down, okay, this year, here are lessons I learned from last year. Some of them I don't want to repeat. Some of them I certainly want to do more. Here's people I should spend more time with. This is something I should be thinking more on. And I lay out my entire year based upon the reflection of last year. And I ask God during this time for one word that would help me in the new year. Just one word. You say, why one word? It's because I'm not smart enough to handle a sentence. And a paragraph would be just off the charts for me. So I ask him for one word, and that's something I just every day think upon and pray about, and usually toward the end of the week it begins to form. And the word that came to my heart this year that I think God wants me to focus on in 2015 is the word intentional. He wants me to be intentional. He wants me to, maybe more than ever before in my life, really focus on some things that are important and live a life every day, not a day that kind of where I try to accept my day, but a day where I lead my day, a day where I focus on making sure that I really put my intentionality where it needs to be. We all heard the expression, all is well that ends well. I'm here to tell you all is well that begins well. And this is the first of the year, and for many of you, this is your chance. This is your shot. This is your moment. This is your time. This is your opportunity. All of you that are watching online, the different campuses, Daystar, this is your opportunity. This is your time. This is your moment. This is your place for you to really begin to live an intentional life. And then I ask usually for a scripture that goes with it, and so let's kind of dive in. On the screen you'll see that the section I'm going to deal with, Matthew chapter 6, is all about focus and faith. In other words, trust God and see things correctly. Be intentional. Okay, let's go with the passage of scripture. Matthew chapter 6. If God gives such attention to the appearance of wildflowers, most of which have never been seen, don't you think he'll attend to you, take pride in you? do his best for you. What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, to not be so preoccupied with getting so that you can respond to God's giving. People who don't know God and the way that he works fuss over these things, but you know both God and how he works. Steep your life in God reality, God initiative, God provisions. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Give your entire attention to what God is doing right now. Don't get worked up about what you may or may not happen tomorrow. God will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when the time comes. Intentional living means two things. In this scripture, intentional living means, first of all, knowing God and how he works. Jesus was very clear to say to us that if we want to live an intentional life, we have to know God and we have to know how he works in our lives. I love the passage in Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 23. Don't let the wise brag on the wisdom. Don't let the heroes brag on their exploits. Don't let the rich brag on their riches. If you brag, brag of this and this only, that you understand and know me. In other words, he said, if you're going to get excited about something, if you're going to brag about something, don't brag about what you got, what you did, where you've been, who you know. Just brag on the fact you know him. In fact, I'll tell you what's fantastic is not the fact that I know him, it's the fact that he knows me. It's amazing, isn't it, that God, the creator, God, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient God, he knows me. And he knows you. And Jesus said, if you want to live an intentional life, you've got to know God and you've got to know the works of God. And you've got to live in his life and you've got to have him fully, you've got to be submerged in who he is and what he's wanting to do in your life. So what does that mean, knowing God and knowing how he works? First of all, it means that God values you. If you know God at all, you know that God values you. In fact, look at your neighbor you're sitting beside right now and just say to them, God values you. Tell them that right now. God values you. A couple of years ago, I was privileged to do the opening session at the United Nations in New York. And so I was speaking to all the leaders, the ambassadors of every country, and I wanted to be sure to give them a message that would really help them with their countries. And so I did a lesson that was basically entitled 3 Questions Every Follower Asks of a Leader. And I shared with them, regardless of their culture, regardless of where they were in the world, I would promise them that the people of their country, every leader within that country, they would be asking their leaders these 3 questions. And the 3 questions are simple. Do you care for me? If somebody's going to follow you, they want to know if you care for them. Who wants to follow somebody that doesn't care for them? Can you help me? And in other words, is it going to get better if I follow you? If I get in the leadership line, is it going to improve my life? Can you help me? And thirdly, can I trust you? In every culture, in every society, in every nation, people ask those 3 questions of their leaders all the time. Do you love me? Can you help me? Can I trust you? And the greatest leader of all, Jesus, can say a resounding yes on all 3. He can help you. He loves you, and you can trust him. And when you follow Jesus through the Gospels, the thing that impresses you the most about Jesus is that he valued people. Jesus valued people. Turn the pages of all 4 Gospels. Everywhere you go, you see that Jesus valued people. The conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees was very simple. They valued knowledge, and he valued people. They valued what they knew about the Scriptures. They were always thinking that life composed of a Bible quiz. And Jesus said, wait a minute, you don't understand. You got to value people. You got to see people, and there are so many examples of Jesus valuing people, but the one I love so much is the one that we know so well, the prodigal son. We know all about him messing his whole life up. He's in a pig pen now, asking himself, what's a Jewish boy like me in a pig pen? And he says, I'm going to go home to my dad. But he said, if I'm going to go home to my dad, I've got to have a speech prepared because I've certainly messed up my life. And his speech was very simple. He said, I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son. And he practiced it. And I know he practiced it because if you follow the story, it says when he came to his father, he fell down and immediately said this speech. I mean, he had been practicing all the way back to the father's house. He was saying to himself, I've sinned against God. I've sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son. I've sinned against God. I've sinned against you. I don't deserve to be your son. I've sinned against God. I've sinned against you. I don't deserve. He practiced it. And when he got to the father, he just fell down and he gets his speech out. Oh, I don't deserve to be your son. There were only two people that believed that he didn't deserve to be called his father's son. The prodigal that was on his knees in a repentant stage, and the older religious brother who said, you know, I've worked so hard and I've done so much for you, Father, and you're giving a party to the kid that went home. And I have a message for you in 2015. And the message is beautiful about God valuing you. God valuing you online. God value you on every campus. And here's the message. You can't disappoint God. You can't disappoint God. Disappointment is the gap between expectation and reality. When we're disappointed, it's because we expected something that we didn't receive. Isn't that true? And we say, wow, I kind of expected that, and wow, I received that, and wow, it wasn't what I kind of thought it would be, and I'm a little bit surprised, I'm a little bit disappointed. That's why the prodigal practiced the speech. I don't deserve to be called your son. He said, give me a bunk in the barnyard. I'll be a servant. You see, get the picture. The boy, the prodigal, was so disappointed in himself that he naturally thought the father would be disappointed in him. And I just want you to know, God's ways are higher than yours, and God's thoughts are higher than yours. And don't dumb God down. Don't dumb him down. Don't bring him down to your level of thinking. And the boy said, I know God, the father's going to be disappointed, and the father's not disappointed. In fact, the older brother, he can't understand why dad's throwing the party. Can I tell you something? Neither son knew the father. If they would have known the father, they would have known how much he valued his boy. And I just want you to know that to live this year of 2015 in an intentional way, understand that God values you. And remember this when you think of the older brother: legalism overvalues works and undervalues people. I've seen it happen throughout my entire life. People that are legalistic, they overvalue what they're doing for God, and they undervalue the people that God so beautifully, unconditionally loves. So to live a life of intentionality, know God, and know that he values you, and know, secondly, that he will take care of you. That he will take care of you. Every year, Margaret and I give our family, our children, our grandchildren a gift for Christmas, and the gift is a trip. We take them on a trip somewhere every year. Every year, that's our Christmas gift. We want to create memories for our kids and grandchildren. So this year we went and spent a week. We literally spent up to Christmas Day in Hawaii, and so we had the grandchildren there. And so Margaret and I said, let's give our grandchildren, we have 5, let's give our 5 grandchildren a verse this year. And so we thought about them and talked about them, and we prayed about it. And so we picked out a verse for each one of our grandchildren, a different verse based on where they are in their life, their temperament, that whole process. And then I looked up a quote that was similar to the verse that they could have. And then we wrote a 3 to 4 line prayer for them based on that verse, and we laminated. You have to know I laminate everything, so you just excuse me, but I just do. And we laminate with their favorite colors, and we sat with them individually during that week. We sat down individually with them, and we read the scripture. We gave them the quote. We gave them the prayer, And the theme that we had for our children this year was the theme of trust. We just want our kids to know that God is a trustworthy God. And I just want you to know you can trust him. You can't trust yourself. You all right out there? Sometimes you can't trust others, but you can trust God.
And for the next, 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you my best advice. And my best advice, if I just had one day to spend with you, or in this case, if I had just a few minutes to spend with you, what I would say to you is, if you want to do well, if you want to have a legacy, leave a legacy, have legs to your legacy, I want you to live an intentional life. That's the key. You see, most people, they don't live intentionally. They don't live on purpose. Most people, they don't lead their life. They accept their life. And because of that, they never reach their potential. And I would encourage you to intentionally live your life for several reasons, and I'll give you just a couple very quickly. Number one is the fact that the best way to improve your life is to live an intentional life. And the reason for that is very simple. Intentional living moves you from good intentions to good actions. And good intentions probably is the most overrated two words in the English language. No one has ever had any improvement with just good intentions. Nobody's ever had their lives changed with good intentions. People, you've never added value to people with just good intentions. Good intentions has no action in it. We want to go from good intentions to good actions. You see, the great dividing line in life between people who do well and people who don't do well is they cross that bridge. They go from I intend to do something to I did something. They cross that intentional living bridge. My mentor, John Wooden, for so many years, would look at his basketball players. He was a great coach at UCLA, and he would say to them, now, don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me what you're going to do. And what he was saying is, you could talk all day about what you want to do to improve your world, but it doesn't improve your world. You gotta do something that improves your world. You see, one of the greatest gaps in life is the gap between sounding good and doing good. And intentional living improves your life because the moment you intentionally live, now you're doing good. It moves you from my desire to my action. It moves you from someday to today. It takes you from being passive to becoming active. It takes you from occasional to continual. And I'll tell you what it does. It takes you from dreaming to doing. So it's the greatest way to improve your life. And I can tell you also, it teaches you and me to have what I call front-end thinking. If I'm going to have an intentional life, that means I have to have some intentional thinking on the front end. An intentional life is not something that just, quote, happens. It's not something you just wake up and say, wow, okay, I'm living in. No. You see, what precedes intentional living is intentional thinking. I wrote a book on how successful people think. And in that book, I talked about the differences between successful and unsuccessful people. And the successful people, one of the things they do is they think up front. And one of the things I love about Uplift is that it is thinking big picture. It's thinking up front. It's saying if we're going to really change our world, we're going to have to go into kids' lives and get to the younger generation. Intentional living causes me to make every day count. It doesn't allow me to skip a day. Oops, what happened? Sometimes life just sneaks up on people. But the moment that I'm intentional, I realize that I want to make every day my masterpiece, and I want to do every day. I want to make every day count, and it keeps me from procrastinating. And again, what's the great gap? It's the great gap between knowing and doing, and knowing never gets us anywhere. Doing gets us everywhere. And then, intentional living, it allows us to make our changes one step at a time. We can't change everything. We're not even supposed to try to change everything at once. But when I become intentional, I look and say, okay, what can I change? Okay? And what's the most important thing for me to work on right now in my life? What is it that I can do that can really start improving my life? And so what I want to do for the remainder of this small teaching that I'm giving is to share with you how you can begin to improve your life, how you can begin to be intentional. I mean, what steps do I take right now, since we're leaving intentions and going to actions? What steps can I take right now that just begins to uplift my life? How do I do that? Well, get ready, because I'm going to give it to you right now. I want to encourage you, first of all, to be intentional in your growth. I am so thankful because when I was young, in my 20s, I had a mentor walk into my life and just basically asked me if I had a growth plan. I did not. And he said to me these words that changed my life. He said, growth is not automatic. You don't become automatically better. If you're going to really personally grow and develop yourself, you have to be intentional. And then he explained to me, he said, John, we automatically become older, but we don't automatically become better. Wow, that's a life change, isn't it? And so as I'm automatically getting older, I want to be intentional about getting better in that process. And I'm just going to say to you that I would encourage you to develop a personal growth plan for your life. And what I mean very simply is every day have growth experiences, every day read growth material, every day practice growth things, and you'll begin to understand that the only guarantee that the future is going to be better than today is that you're growing today. I'm 73, and I still every day intentionally learn and develop myself and grow. And again, that's one of the things I love about Uplift and what you're doing is that you're impressing upon a younger generation that they're going to have to be intentional in their growth. And if they are, it's huge life change. My father knew that. And when I entered into the 7th grade, I'm the middle child. I have an older brother, younger sister. When my brother entered the 7th grade, when my sister Trish entered the 7th grade, my father sat down with us and said, now, from 7th grade through high school, I want to pour into you. He began to teach us how to intentionally grow. And he would pick books out for us to read. And he would pay us to read those books. In fact, whatever the book cost, that's what he would pay us when we finished reading it. And every night at the dinner table, we'd have family discussion about what we were reading. Now, all of my friends, they didn't get paid to read good books. My friends got paid to do chores. In fact, I went to my dad one time and said, Dad, I think I ought to get paid to do chores, don't you? He said, no, that's a terrible idea. No. He said, you do chores because you're part of the family and you don't get paid to be part of the family. He said, why would I pay you to take out the garbage unless I want you to grow up and be a garbage man? He said, I pay you to read good books. And so from the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, the three of us children, we just read good books. And by the time we graduated, we were already on our way. My father understood. Put him on a growth plan. Be intentional in your personal development and growth. As I look back, I could say that no doubt about it, I got the fast start towards success in life because the books that I read that my father paid me an allowance to read when I grew up. I would encourage you not only to be intentional in your growth, I encourage you to be intentional in your attitude. I just want you to know that your attitude that you have right now is a choice. That's why I never feel sorry for people who have a bad attitude, because they chose it. Which means if you chose a bad attitude, you could unchoose, if that's a word, the bad attitude and choose a good one. And the moment I realized that it was a choice, then it makes me responsible. It makes you responsible to have a good attitude. And you say, well, John, if you knew my adversity, if you knew my difficulty, you'd have a bad attitude. No. I know people who have grown up in very difficult situations that they've had and chosen a great attitude. I talked to a very successful person yesterday. His name is Jason, and he told me that when he was 14, he listened, this is a long time ago, he listened to a tape of mine on leadership and attitude, And he looked at his mom and said, I want more of those tapes. I want to hear him some more. And he basically said, 14, 15, 16 years of age, he said, I just consumed your books and consumed your teachings. And he said, where I am today is because I made that decision at a very, very young age. I'm just here to say to you that your attitude is the difference maker. I didn't say attitude is everything. I just said it's the main thing. And a good, great, positive attitude, an attitude of adding value to people, an attitude of significance, all that stuff is just going to increase and improve who you are and the legacy that you create. I would encourage you to be intentional in your relationships. It's so true. It is so true. When I was young, I had a mentor walk into my life, and this was just huge. He just said, John, in 5 years, you will become the person that, based on the books you read and the people you hang with. And little did I realize how important that was. What am I reading? What am I learning? Hey, what podcast am I listening to? Who's influencing me right now? Your relationships are so key to your success. In fact, if you took your 5 closest friends and looked at them, pretty much where they're going is where you're going. You got to ask yourself, is that where I want to go? I would encourage you to be intentional in your leadership, because everything rises and falls on leadership. And I just love the fact that you can learn to lead at a very young age. I would encourage you. I wrote a book called Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. And that book has 10 things that you want to work on, to learn, to grow in, to be a good leader. It's kind of like the practical leadership book that you just begin to read it and you begin to say, okay, I can do this. And you begin to learn and you begin to grow in your leadership itself. And then I would encourage you to be intentional in your significance. This is probably my favorite part of the entire lesson, because I want you to be successful, but there's a difference between being successful and being significant. I think I kind of learned that again in my 20s when I heard my friend Zig Ziglar say that if you'll help other people in life get what they want, that everything that you want, you'll receive. But his emphasis was, instead of trying to get what you want first, help other people get what they want. In other words, he was saying, live a significant life, because a significant life is always about others, adding value to others. A successful life, which I hope you're successful also, is all about adding value to yourself. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you live a significant life. You want to make sure that you are constantly adding value to others. And one of the things I learned is the fact that selfishness and significance, they're not compatible at all. If I'm a selfish person, I'm going to ask people to add value to me. If I'm a significant person, I'm going to every day ask, who can I add value to? So because I'm honored to be talking to the next great generation, I'm honored to be talking to people that have your life entirely in front of you, I just want to share with you that if you'll do 5 things every day, you'll lead intentionally this significant life. And I want that for you. And trust me, you'll not only have a personal uplift, you'll bring an uplift to all those around you. Every day I do 5 things. Take good notes now. Listen carefully. Integrate what I'm about to share with you in your life. Trust me, it'll move you to significance. Every day, number 1, I value people. That's the core. That's the foundation. You will not add value to people unless you value people. In fact, if I don't value you, if I devalue you, I'll never add value to you. So it starts with valuing people. Now you have to understand I'm a person of faith. And I think the greatest leader, whether you're a person of faith or not, I think you could maybe acknowledge that at least one of the greatest leaders that ever lived was Jesus. And if you look at the life of Jesus, one of the things that stands out about who he was and how he so beautifully changed lives and positively affected people is that he valued everyone. When you came into the influence of Jesus, you knew he loved you unconditionally. You knew he valued you. So every day, I value people. That's where it all starts. Now, the moment that I value people, I can go to the second thing I do every day, and that is every day I think of ways to add value to you. So when I knew I was going to be with Uplift today, that I'd be talking to Joe and I'd be talking to you, I asked myself, how can I add value to you? And then Joe and I had an amazing conversation of which I talked to him about I Lead, and I talked to him about youth curriculum that teaches great values and how that we could come alongside and serve you and add value to you. Well, when I looked at my calendar this morning and realized I would be teaching you today, my first question is, okay, what can I do? I began to think, how can I add value to you? Who will I see? How can I add value to you? On the front end of your day, every day, look and say, okay, who am I going to come in contact with? What is it that I can say to them? What is it that I can do for them? What resource can I give them that will add value to them? Become a plus in your life. You see, each one of us, we're either a plus in the lives of others and we're adding value to them, or to be honest with you, we're a minus in their lives and we're not adding value to them. So every day I value people. Every day I think of ways to add value to people. I do that at the beginning of my day as I looked at my calendar. And number 3, I look for ways to add value to people. Wow. And by the way, who we are determines how we see others. And so if I am looking for ways to add value to you, guess what? I'll see ways to add value to you when I'm with you because I'm looking for them. Just like if I'm not looking for them, I won't find them. We see not what is in front of us. We see what we're prepared to see. We see what we're passionate to see. So every day I value people, think of ways to add value to people, look for ways to add value to people. Number 4, every day I do things that add value to people. In other words, now I cross that line and I go into action. In fact, every evening, just like every morning, I look at my calendar and say, who will I add value to today? Intentionally, every night I look at the people I saw and I ask myself the every night question, who did I add value to today? I make myself accountable. Who did I help? Who was I a plus for today? So every day, I value people, think of ways to add value to people, look for ways to add value to people, do things that add value to people. And number 5, every day, I encourage others. I encourage others to add value to others. And I'm doing that to you right now. I want Uplift to expand because the principles, the values, the idea, the mission, the vision, it's all so good. So you got to spread it. And how do you spread it? By being contagious, loving what you do and having joy in what you do in such a way that people say, oh my gosh, whatever you got, I want it too. I want it too. I lead a lot of international trips and I take my coaches, we have a coaching company, I take them with me. And we go to different countries and we spend maybe 4 or 5 hard days working in training facilitators to facilitate transformation tables. We'll in 4 days, we've trained 25,000 transformation table facilitators. So they pay their own way and they give up a lot to go there and they're going to add value to people. And I tell them, I know you came to add value to these people, but I want you to know that by the end of the trip, they will have added more value to you. This is what happens when you intentionally add value to people. The value received just becomes ridiculously compounded. And the statement I give them and I leave with you today in my talk is I share with them, once you have tasted significance, in other words, once you have lived a life of adding value to people, Once you've tasted significance, success will never satisfy. And that's the truth. So for uplift, I pray for, wish for, dream for, hope for you to keep living lives of significance and adding value to people, and especially the younger generation.
Every day, number 5, I intentionally grow. Every day. Every day I intentionally grow. Oh my goodness. Every day I intentionally grow. This is huge. If you'll just hang with me, can you give me, if you'll just give me, can I have 5, if I have 5 more minutes, okay? 5 more minutes, okay. No, there are other things on the program, and I'm not wanting to disrespect anybody or the program, so if you could just, okay. So just, this is important right here. This is important because every day I intentionally grow. Are you with me? Yes. In 1977 I wrote this. It's laminated. Yeah, it's my prized possession. Because I wasn't in a growth environment. I wasn't lucky like you. I didn't belong to an organization named by Silas. I didn't belong to an organization that is an amazing organization that's breaking all kind of records. I didn't get to go on the rocket ride. I wasn't on a ride. I was on a donkey. And that ass wasn't going anywhere. My organization's theme song was, "I shall not be moved." And they weren't. And all of a sudden I decided I wanted to be a success, but I didn't have peers like you to help me be successful. I didn't have leaders like you have to help me be successful. I didn't have an organization like you have to be successful. I didn't have strategy like you and training like you to be successful. I didn't have any of that. And so I'm a kid and I said, I want to be successful. And I knew that I had to create a growth environment, and I wasn't in a growth environment. And so how do I create a growth environment when you aren't in a growth environment? The people that I was with, their idea of progress was moving backwards slowly. So I wrote this down in the late 70s. And it's still true today. Here's what I think a growth environment is. A growth environment is a place where others are ahead of me. In other words, I want to be around people that are better than me. I want to be around people that are more successful than me. I want to be around people that are faster than me. And that's exactly what you have in this organization. You got some pace setters, don't you, huh? You got some amazing, amazing pace setters. Let me just put it this way. When you're at the head of the class, you're in the wrong class. That's good, isn't it? Yeah, it is. What do you say? It's just good. My name's John. I'm your friend. A growth environment is a place where I am continually challenged. I'm continually challenged. I mean, every day I get up, I got another hill to climb. I'm not looking for the hammock. I'm looking for the hill. A growth environment is a place where my focus is forward. It's right out in front of me. It's not behind me. It's not the good old days. It's not yesterday. A growth environment is a place where the atmosphere is affirming, where the people around me, they're encouraging me. Encouragement is the oxygen of the soul. A growth environment is a place where I am out of my comfort zone. In other words, I'm telling you, I'm taking virgin territory. I'm going places where I've never been before, and I'm not one bit comfortable. I'm nervous, and I'm excited, and I'm stretching, and I'm praying, and I'm holding on, and I'm just, help me. Help me, Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda. Help. I'm over my head. Are you with me? And can I tell you something? You want to be over your head. You want to be over your head. You don't want to be in the wading pool of life with ankle deep water. Get over your head. And by the way, when you're over your head, it doesn't matter how deep the water is. You're over your head. A growth environment is a place where I wake up excited. Man, I know a lot of people, they don't even wake up. We're supposed to leave our footprints in the sands of time, but a lot of people, they're just leaving their butt prints. Yeah, they just got butt prints in the sands of time. They're not doing anything. You with me, huh? Hello, come on, talk to me. There are some people, they're already dead. They just haven't made it official yet. Yeah. A growth environment is a place where failure is not my enemy. It's not my enemy. Failure is my friend. Oh, yes. I write 3 books at a time. This one's not out yet, but I've written it. It comes out next year. I love the title. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. It's good, isn't it? That's good. It really is. A growth environment is a place where others are growing. Some of you, I've seen some people, they win the race, but it was because no one else was running. I won. Oh, where's everybody? Oh, I won. A growth environment is a place where people desire change. They want something different. They want something fresh. A growth environment is a place where growth is modeled, where growth is expected. Now, what am I saying? That 5th rule, that 5th, number 5, and that rule of 5 on learning to lead and lifting your lid is all about intentional growth.
Samuel Wilson from Duluth, Georgia said, John, talk about memorable or unforgettable. And Samuel, we're supposed to do one word. This is called Minute with Maxwell. Now, could you not make up your mind? I mean, memorable or unforgettable. Now, they are very similar, but I would, I would assume that you could pick one. Okay, don't chase 2 rabbits. You don't catch them. You got to just chase 1 rabbit. And I've already begun to make this Minute with Maxwell memorable because we're teaching something that would not be at all in the script. So let's use the word unforgettable, okay? Someday I'm going to write a book just entitled Unforgettable. And what I would like people to know is this. It doesn't take a lot to be unforgettable. It doesn't take a lot to be memorable, but it does take intentionality. Every time you're in an experience with somebody, always ask yourself, what can I say, what could I do that sets this experience apart from someone else who would just have this experience? For example, on Sunday, I'm going to take about 12 friends of our vision of transformation to Paraguay. So it's a 9-hour flight. It's a long flight. And so we'll leave, and the dozen of us, 13 of us will be on the plane for 9 hours, and we'll have great mentoring sessions. In fact, what they tell me when we go to Paraguay on these private flights for transformation, every time they say, if we wouldn't have landed in Paraguay and done the transformation, if we just could have had the 9 hours going down, the 9 hours going back, it was worth the whole trip. Well, one of the things we'll do coming back to make it unforgettable is have them all stand in the plane, and we'll do the hokey pokey. Yeah, we will. And I'll tell them nobody on this plane has ever flown above South America and done the hokey pokey. We will be the first and the last. And I promise you, when they go home and their spouses say, how was the trip? They'll talk about the hokey pokey. They will. Why wouldn't they? No one does the hokey pokey on a plane flying above South America. They just don't do the hokey pokey. So now, that was fun, wasn't it? Ask yourself, where are my hokey pokey moments in the experiences that I have with people? And I'm not saying do the hokey pokey. That's kind of hokey. I am just saying to you, ask yourself, what can we say? What can we do that'll just set the trip apart, the experience apart from others? And when you do that, Samuel and I both know you will be unforgettable, or if you can't make up your mind, also memorable.
I want to ask it on behalf, because we both started out. Let's help people today, and obviously you've done that in many folds over. But there's people watching this. They say, look, I'd like to start to transform my life.
Yeah.
You know, there's transformational leaders, but I need to transform my life. I want to take a step towards being happier, being more successful. And they had a minute with John Maxwell. They ran into you in a coffee shop. They said, Mr. Maxwell, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to me about just transforming my life? What would be the step you would take, the thought I should have, the action maybe I should take? Your answer to them would be
Yeah,
what?
well, and in fact, I'm going to talk to him right now. Being a person of faith, the first thing I would share with you is a relationship with God, okay? And if you don't have a relationship with God, you're my friend, love you as much as someone that does, so please understand that. I'm not trying to convert you. It's just that when you find something that really is beautiful, you want to share it with everybody. And I remember when I became a person of faith, the verse that grabbed me the most is the verse that says, if a person is in Christ, he becomes a new creation. And I did. I became a new person, again, because of him. Now, let's skip that, okay? If you're not a person of faith, just act like you never heard it, okay? Let's go to the real thing. I would sit down at the table with you and I'd say, if you really want to be transformed, you have to live an intentional life. This is so simple, I don't want you to miss it. Most people don't lead their life, they accept their life. And when you accept your life, you are living on things that are not worthy of your time and effort and energy. And you heard me say in a moment, everything worthwhile is uphill. The reason I want you to understand that is, to go uphill, you have to be intentional. Nobody ever went uphill by accident. You've never read a book on accidental achievements. You have to be intentional with what you do and who you are. And so I would just say to you, find your strengths, become very intentional, and commit your life every day to it's all uphill. It's all uphill. And listen, Ed's very successful. He's got great businesses, he's made a lot of money. Can I tell you something? It's still uphill for him. See, the great mistake we make is we think, I'm going to go out and make enough money, and there's a day when I can relax and I can rest and everything's going to be easy. Can I tell you something? The day that you have that day, one of your children, gets in an accident, problems will never, ever leave you. Issues, obstacles, difficulties, they're always going to surround you. So you never get to that place where you've got it made. You're not supposed to got it made. You're supposed to add value to people, and it's all uphill.
Oh my gosh.
So the moment I understand that, then what happens is I commit myself to it, and then it becomes a beautiful uphill climbing life. Because one thing that's beautiful about going uphill is the scenery is really good. So you got to be intentional with it. So that's what I would say to them. Be intentional. Start today. And here's here's the difference. Good intentions are overrated. Gosh. I know so many people, well, I'm going to do that. Yes, I think that's a good idea. I think I'm going to do that. So good intentions are the most overrated phrase in the world. You've got to go from good intentions to good actions. Nothing happens until you've got good actions, and you won't have good actions until you're intentional with your life. My name's John, and I'm your friend. And I'm yours.
Chris, what has it been, 20 plus years that you and I have been in this environment? And we've talked about growth, I guess, every way that we can, and yet today it's just as relevant in your 20 plus years of tenure, executive on our team, running the nation, running around the nation, speaking, and yet you're still growing. I know that about you, and I'm the same way. I've just been challenged. Even most recently, I've been challenged to grow significantly. And so, hey, I never get tired of this subject, and I never get tired of this subject talking to it with John, 75 years young.
Still doing it.
Still doing it. Never get tired of working alongside of people like you that's still doing it. So, man, I'm excited.
Yeah, when I found out that this was the topic we were going to talk about, I was like, this is so appropriate, because I don't know where I would be today if I didn't work in an environment. I know you would say the same thing. And then to be modeled by John. It's not you're on the road with John. You guys are at different conferences, speakers, and meetings. And without a doubt, I always see him taking notes. Then you get in the car and you're like, man, here's what I learned. What did you learn? You better be ready to answer that question, because he just models that, and he's kind of given that to us. So much so that I brought this for those that are watching on YouTube.
I love it.
Okay, this is a little show and tell.
I love it.
I did it yesterday too in our leadership team meeting. I'm in a show and tell mode. We're going back to elementary school.
I like it.
But that's all right. So much so that as you helped us cast vision and come up with our mission and what's important in our organization. And we do believe that everybody deserves to be led well. Obviously, you wanted people first. We get that. That's 100% us. The second one we have on our card, and every single one of our team members have this, is it is about growth. And on there, it talks about we invest in growth every day. Doesn't matter whether you're 18, 19, 20, when you and I began to think about what that looked like, or even now. And I won't mention our age as we get into this. But we also believe that it happens daily, not in a day. And what I love about that is that John says if we want things to get better, then we've got to go after it on a daily basis. Now, I'm going to take you down a little bit, if you don't mind. I want to take you down a little bit of a different path than maybe normal. I want to go away from the notes for a minute, and we're going to come back. And we've heard John talk about everything worthwhile is uphill.
Yep.
And man, growth can be an uphill battle. Yep. It doesn't often happen when we're going downhill and things are good. And I want to talk a little bit. I want to kind of lift the curtain on some things that you've been growing personally. And I think it's so appropriate because you were so intentional behind this. And it started, I think growth happens in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You can observe it and learn. You can teach and learn. You can get feedback and learn. Matter of fact, I was on a call today with one of the organizations that we work with, and it was Matt McLean with Wealth Advisors. Let me just read this real quick to you. It says, man, feedback is a gift. It's where you grow. When given by the right person in the right manner and received in the right way. And I thought, oh, that's so good. Tell me that again. I'm going to be with Mark later, and I want to share this with him. Received in the right way. Here's where I'm going. You started a journey intentionally the fourth quarter of last year.
Yep.
We called it the family rooms. And Mark set the stage, and you said, hey, family rooms sometimes get uncomfortable. I want feedback. And that began a growth journey that I haven't seen in you in a long time, and we're going to unpack that just a minute. But what I want you to do is I want you to take us back. And what was the intentionality behind saying, man, I want feedback. I want these family room conversations. I want to grow. I want us as an organization and a culture to grow. Talk to us a little bit about that to set the stage of now what you're doing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Well, I started getting a little bit of feedback from teammates, and I started getting feedback from key relationships like our thought leaders that perhaps our culture was missing a beat or was missing a little bit of something. Come to find out, it was we were saying more than what we were doing. We were not completely matched up in our actions. So it started there, and then that caused me to go, I've got a problem in the organization. What is our problem? What is that? And this is not at all a negative thing. This is very powerful and positive as we unpack this, I'm sure. But I went to John, and I did something that I do all the time with John. I state the problem. I see if we have agreement on our problem. And then I'm always prepared with 3 suggestions to remedy the problem and then a recommendation. Here's 3 suggestions, John, but here's my recommendation. And John and I just have this formula for how we have led him, the visionary, the owner, and me, the CEO, the implementer of his vision. Well, that has changed a little bit, but John's mentoring in my life has not changed. We still have that same formula. So I went to John. I said, here's my problem. And what was interesting, and I won't dig into this because that's not the subject today, John didn't agree with me. Now, we beat it up for about 10 hours of playing time. John, this is why I think this is the problem. Yeah, I think it is the problem. No, it's not the problem, Mark. No, it's not. And finally, after he had listened to me long enough, which was about 10 hours, he identified the real problem. And the real problem was that I needed to roll up the sleeves and get engaged in the lifeblood, in the culture, in the day-to-day rigor of our organization. And so that started it. And so the best way I knew to do that as a conclusion to John and I saying, I've got to roll up the sleeves and get involved in what's going on in the organization, were these family rooms, Chris. You were a part of them. And in fact, you were a part of the very first one. I remember this. I had, they were about 12 or 13 of them. You
dedicated a lot of time to it.
And in those family rooms, Chris, a real reoccurring opportunity, challenge, opportunity to really address things in the organization began to bubble up. And it was that. Then we've had a lot of leadership meetings with that. I've validated that, verified that with the leadership team. But it all started with a realization, hey, I think I have a problem. Then it went to the next step, John and I agreeing on the problem in the organization, and then we're beginning to be intentional about fixing it.
And I love the fact that John says the only guarantee that it's going to get better from what you heard. You accepted that feedback, and the hearts were pure. You received it the right way. And John says the only way it's going to get better is if we grow, and you got to do that. So I'm going to go out of order a little bit here. John gave us an incredible growth plan here, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I know the process that you went through to do this. The first thing that you did was you said, I'm going to go and I'm going to reflect on what I heard. And you do this every year. The timing of this happened to be pivotal this year for you, but you spent, John mentioned, at least 1 hour a week. I think you accomplished a year-long process of that in probably just about 3 days. Talk about then what you heard, what you learned as you're growing through this, and the reflection and how powerful that was and allowed you to come out of that with a tremendous growth plan that we'll talk about after that.
Yeah, so before the growth plan, it started with I read a book, I think I have recommended on the podcast, Chris. It's by Gary Keller, which is one of the founders of Keller Williams.
Yeah.
Gary Keller wrote a book called The One Thing. And he talks about how that leaders need to synthesize down to that one thing they need to be focused on, and then they need to spend the best part of their day in that. For me, the best part of the day is the morning. So immediately coming out of family rooms, Chris, you'll remember this, I carved out and canceled everything that I did every morning of the week because I had identified 5 things that needed my undivided attention. 5 things in our organization. And I came out of that family room, I had already carved out every morning was going to be focused on my one thing. And I started focusing for 4 solid weeks, 4 hours a day on one thing in the morning for 4 hours on what I could do from a creativity and from a problem-solving perspective that I could begin focusing on in the organization. So it really started there way before the growth plan that we'll get to. I started really assessing with a clear mind, with an undistracted attention, and then with as much creativity that I could muster in a one-on-one, one-to-myself environment. I began working through how do I creatively go after these 5 areas.
So you go through that, and then you make up your mind, I am going to intentionally grow. Now, talk a little bit about the next steps for you. So John says, hey, we're going to make a commitment. So you did the reflection. You're making a commitment. Now, for you, that growth looked like many different things. Mentors, books. You're just absorbing content, and you are committed. Talk about where your mind went when you said, I know I need to grow, and I'm going to absorb as much content as I possibly can. What led you down the path of saying, what resources? How do I tap into this? What does that look like? Let our listeners hear from that, because I think each one of us have challenges like that in our life, and sometimes we don't know how to go about the process, but you've lived out and modeled this, and John's given us his plan, and it's in direct alignment with that.
Yeah, well, one is if you can synthesize down what the real problem is, and you can synthesize it down to as much simplicity as possible, you're going to then be able to build the best comprehensive focused plan available. We distilled it down to we had a momentum challenge. You're part of the organization last year. Congratulations on podcast land. What was it, 46% growth last year. This guy right here that you're seeing, if you're watching YouTube, this guy grew 47%. But now let me say that. What was interesting is I still could come back and say our common problem was momentum.
Correct.
That was with some parts of our organization having best years ever, some teammates having personal best years ever. We still had a momentum problem to what? To the vision that unified us all together. So if you can come up with a common root to the problem, because that'll establish common language when you begin to build this intentionality around a plan. So the problem, and then figure out a way to unify everybody to the same problem. That was a dance. That was a challenge because I got some people sitting across from me that killed it last year, and I had some people on his team that had personal best, and then I had other teammates that we just were not out of the starting blocks yet. So how do I unify everybody on we have a momentum problem? So synthesize it to as much simplicity as possible. That's why we have a word for the year. You have a word for the year. I heard what it was. I've got one. My whole growth plan is around that. Well, the plan to get the organization on the track that it needed that kind of simplicity too. What's the word and how does that word apply to everybody? Because if you can get that word to a simplest form, and then you can get everybody seeing their way to embrace the word from how it will help them, now we're on a track to begin to build that plan.
Yeah, it became our rallying cries. In essence, is what you were doing. No matter where each vertical or team was doing, it didn't matter. As a whole, as a team, that became our rallying cry together. So you and I've heard you say simplify a ton of times in the last 90 days. So you simplified the problem, and you go, okay, now I got to grow in that area.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about what you had. And remember, we're trying to keep this podcast under 3 hours.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So, but I know how intentional you were about that and the amount of resources you consumed. Talk about that process.
I'm privileged to have a weekly call with a bunch of leader-minded people. So I ask about 4 people that I really believe could help me in the area of momentum. I said, what do you recommend that I read? What do you recommend that I consume? Got some great feedback. Then I went to my call to hundreds of people and I said, hey, if you've got a book or a recommendation on momentum, let me have it. And I just took all of that, assimilated. There was a lot of redundancy. People recommended the same thing. Then that became at the top of my list.
Yeah.
And so I have been, in fact, yesterday in a leadership meeting that you and I were in, somebody brought me another book on momentum. And I'm just consuming that and digesting it. So going back to my 4 hours in the day, I would spend 2 hours reading a book on the subject matter that I had before I even started my 4-hour day. And again, all that comes back to get people to give you input from their perspective with the clarity and the simplicity that you're going to lead the team. Do the clarity and simplicity on what you're going to grow into. And like you said, I cannot remember, but one other time maybe that I have been this diligent in being a sponge on content on one piece of subject matter. I have read and consumed. You see it every time I come into a leadership meeting. I give you a new tidbit that I have read to give us common language on what we're going to do.
Yeah. And what I've also seen, and I haven't mentioned this to you, but I watched you walk the fourth quarter and then through the end of the year and the reflection, and there's some discouragement there, certain things, right?
Yep.
All of us have discouragement areas of our life that we wish we grew in, right? But what's been fascinating for me to see, and again, this will be the first time you kind of hearing this out of my mouth, which is when I saw you prioritize that, and I mentioned to you yesterday, this can be so good for the company, but it's been so good for you as a leader because when you prioritize that and this growth and the intentionality of growth that John's talking about here, you become, happier might be a little bit of a soft word, but you become stronger, you become more confident, you almost become more resilient to that uphill battle that we're taking. And what I love about it is you absolutely, John's second point in the plan is you make that commitment public.
Yeah.
And you do that. You talk about it. We're talking about it on the podcast.
Yep.
But more importantly, you share that with specifically our leadership team every time you come in there. And John says early on in the lesson, what are you doing to develop yourself and others? Yeah. And I know that we are growing. I've read more books, not than you have, but that I did in the first couple weeks of last year because of the challenge that you're putting out with us. What's the intentionality behind sharing not only what you're learning, but sharing what you're consuming and how you're doing it with your team?
Three reasons, Chris, that comes to mind immediately. And like Chris said, this was not scripted or prepared, but 3 reasons. One is accountability. I always grow better on a personal level or at a team level because you, like you said, I wrote that down too, John. How are you growing personally? How are you growing your team? I want to put it out there that I want my team, our team, to know that I'm growing. And I'm putting it out there. These are the books I'm reading. And then I come and show you what I'm reading with things that we're doing. That's accountability. The second reason is common language. I want people to know what is driving the intentionality around my leadership right now. What's happening is you're picking up some of those books. Others 100%. Are picking up that book. So the common language is now not only rallying us to the vision and the direction I want to take the organization, it's rallying all of us in how we all are growing. You're growing. Yesterday's leadership meeting, and again, this is just family talk, which I love this podcast, by the way. Yeah. Yesterday, the way we complimented one another was staggering to me. I don't think we've ever complimented one another as much as we did yesterday in that meeting. And I could tell you're reading the books. Ben, you were talking about some of the practices and principles that we're using in the first person. Hey, we've got to. And I went, you go, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't even have to say it because it's being repeated. But that brings me to the third thing. When you start saying what the common language is and you start holding yourself accountable, now you start giving expectation of why we're doing this, the desired outcome.
That's good.
And so we're in the middle of a process right now that's driving a little bit, me, maybe you too, a little bit crazy because I'm ready to act and we're still in the information gathering.
Meeting.
Yeah,
matter of fact, I got home last night and my wife's like, well, how many steps you had today? I was like, I refuse to report. She's like,
because it was all
we're going on a walk, right? Because I've been with Mark in meetings all day trying to figure this out, right? But you got to do that. You got to figure
and that's going to drive that common set of outcomes that you're wanting. So it's all based on intentionality.
Yeah, I love that. So again, John's second point was you're making it public. We're talking about it to our team. We're talking about it to the enterprise. We're talking about it to you here today. John's last point is you're going to share what you're learning, which you're doing. I want you to close on this thought of growth. You and I could talk about this because we are the product, right? We've been doing it for a long time. It's what we believe in, and we've seen the growth. John mentioned something I think is really important in here. He's like, hey, start off by saying, what's one area of growth of choice? And then what's one area of skill? And you every year come out of your time and your reflection with, yes, a word of the year, but you also, being a person of faith, have a choice that you make of what you're going to study this year from a growth standpoint, tie it to leadership, tie it to your growth, whatever. And then you also have a skill set. Talk a little bit about the power of having both of those, how you come to them in your growth journey, and then what that looks like.
Yeah, so for me, the word for the year is kind of the focus. It's kind of the aspiration, the idea. The skill set comes in what I set with rigor. I have in my growth plan, I have daily, weekly, and monthly rhythms, things that I've got to deliver every day, every week, every month to complement the word, the concept.
Got it.
And so I think what I feel like John's talking about here is if you don't have skill sets to go along with the strengths, if you don't have rigors and disciplines to go along with the word, then it's going to sound nice, but you're not going to see that tangible momentum.
Yeah.
And that's what I have found. The people that are the most effective today, people that are listening and viewing this podcast, you're writing it down. I'm proud of you. Congratulations. I'd give you a standing ovation if I could. But it's the people that get an action item, something that is a skill, something that is a discipline that's going to bring the greatest amount of results after a conversation like this. I hope that between John, Chris, or myself, we've given you a note to capture. Yeah. And I'm sure we have because John has.
John
so we're
us.
good.
Yeah.
But what I hope just as much, not more than, but just as much is you put a skill, a challenge, an application to it that will make you effective. I do a year-end review every year. I'm reading a lot of books on momentum, but I'm telling you, it's these meetings that we're having that is making that more powerful.
Yeah.
The idea, the concept, the discipline without the skill application would render it useless. I would contend. Maybe a little bit of useful, but I'm going to tell you, learning without application is not growth.
Yeah. Remind us again, how many years you been with John?
23.
23 years. And you would admit, and you did, and I would absolutely back you up on this, the last 90 days, the greatest growth you've had. 23 years with the greatest leadership organization and leader that you and I know, and yet you're still growing at a pace. Like, that's what we should strive to do. That's what makes things better. As we wrap, one little question on this. You spend all this intentionality. You build this growth plan. How often do you review it? How often do you go and check it? How often do you hold yourself accountable to it? Because what I want our listeners to do is I want them to develop a growth plan because we want them. We know what's on the other side of that. It doesn't always get easier. Sometimes it gets even harder. Mm-hmm. But man, we want that for you because everybody deserves to be led well, and we want to add value to you. And this is the best way. And John talked about this is where he started. This is where you need to start. you can be intentional about it and you can develop that. And then maybe never look at it again and kind of, how often do you, that rigor that you developed and you try to follow, as you wrap up, how often do you check that and hold yourself accountable to it and adjust it, or maybe just check the box?
So in the first 60 days of a year, I'm reviewing it every day. I reviewed it this morning. I'll review it tomorrow morning. I'll review it Saturday. I'll review it Sunday.
Got it.
I'm reviewing every day. It's got to get in me for it to drive behaviors, to cultivate skill sets like we talked about, to develop habits.
Yeah.
So it's an everyday rigor that I will do every year for the first 60 days. I'm reading it every day. I'm familiarizing myself. Then it pairs back probably to once a week. And then by the third and fourth quarter, it is probably twice a month that I'm pulling it out and reviewing and reflecting. One of the disciplines that I have is in a year-end review this year. Some years it's monthly, some years it's bi-monthly, some years it's quarterly. I will go and assess and tweak the plan based on the effectiveness the plan has had then, so that plan that I got in one setting is a living, breathing organism that makes sense.
That makes
I'll tell you a couple of things that I want to do to wrap today that I feel really strong about. There's two things that I want to challenge you to do personally, because I'm so passionate about personal growth. And it's only the what is this? The 18th of the month. It's really, if you're listening to it live, some of you will listen to it. We're only 18 days into this year. And I want to challenge you to get really intentional.
So talk to us about making intentional steps in 2023 for our own personal growth.
You know, one of my greatest passions and disciplines, to be honest with you. So I'm very passionate about it, which helps with the idea that it can only happen with a lot of discipline, is what I call my year-end review. It's a retreat that I have with myself. And so I'm just coming off of that, which means I'm buzzing. I mean, I've got a clear personal path. I've got a clear path that if I focus on that personal development is going to impact the main categories, the main areas of my life. And I would go, now, number one, it's early January. You're listening to this. You still have time to go and get this year on track. But I believe that all's well that begins well. And what that means to me in the area of personal growth is I have to have every single year a very intentional track, a very intentional set of outcomes that I am expecting, and a very intentional plan to impact and grow and change the 5 key areas of my life. Well, professional is one of those. But I have found I'm a much better professional leader when I am focused on how I am leading myself first. And I would challenge all of us. I mean, it's almost laughable the amount of people that joined a gym late December or are joining a gym right now this week when this podcast. It's almost laughable. At the same time, it's awesome. And I know some of you have probably done it every year for the last 10 years. And who knows, maybe this year will be just like the last 9 and you'll fall off and be unexcited 3 weeks from now. But maybe not. Maybe this is the year that's different for you. See, I found too many people that because of past failures or past disappointments, they resist change in the future. And I can guarantee you this, 100% of the, let's call it goals, or 100% of the New Year's resolutions that don't get set will be unmet. I promise you. That's not a University of Tennessee or Georgia or Harvard study. It's just common sense. If you don't set a goal, if you don't set an aspiration, you can guarantee the fact you will not meet it because it's not set. That's why I would challenge anybody. I don't want change. I don't like change. I've been ineffective with change. Change has always been something that I was not good at. Change anyway. Set a goal to change anyway. Set a New Year's resolution anyway. I don't care if it's the 15th year. Set it again, because if you ever give up and don't set that objective, you can be certain you're going to not get it.
And I came to the conclusion that I want to talk to you about intentional living. Now, about 7 years ago, I wrote a book called Intentional Living. And it's a book that's really helped people understand how to maximize their life. And that's what I kind of want to do with you. I want to talk to you about how you and I need to live intentionally every day, because it's going to really help us to do better and be more successful. And perhaps the way I ought to begin this teaching is by sharing with you a visual that I give many times when I help people and add value to them. And the visual is just very simple. It's just my arm up in the air like this. And the reason I do that is because some of the best advice I've ever heard and received in my own life is the advice I'm going to pass on to you right now, and that is everything worthwhile is uphill. Everything. If you've got a great relationship, it's all uphill. Margaret and I have been married for 52 years. It's been an incredible life together, but it's uphill all the way. I mean, you got to work at your marriage. You got to work in your business relationships. It's all work. And there seems to be just a wrong mindset in the fact that things should be easy, things should be quick, things should come naturally. And life doesn't work that way. But you see, I have to understand that it's uphill. And the reason that I'm talking about that now is because if you're going to go uphill, you have to be intentional. That's just a fact in life. I mean, nobody accidentally went uphill. You never talk to somebody that was successful and ask them how they got to the top of the mountain and have them look at you and say, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I just woke up and here I am. No, that doesn't happen. We know that. You have to be intentional to go uphill, and everything worthwhile is uphill. Everything. Now, the challenge that we have is that we all have what I would call, uphill hopes, okay? This is where our dreams are. This is where we're the very best that we possibly could be. We all have uphill hopes, but we also have downhill habits. And the two just don't mix. They never have, they never will. And so my teaching on intentional living to you today is to really help us to understand that if we live in an intentional life, one that is purposeful, one that is willful, if we live an intentional life, life really is very rewarding to us. But we have to be intentional. If you're going downhill, it can be automatic. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to work at it. You don't have to be intentional. You can just kind of let things happen. But when you let things happen, it's all downhill. I remember having a conversation one time with my friend John Cotter, a Harvard great professor but writer, has written a lot of good stuff on change, et cetera. And we were having a lunch together. And we were talking about intentional living, and I'll never forget, John looked at me and he said, most people accept their life. They don't lead their life. And as soon as he said that to me, I thought how true that is. We accept our life and then expect it to turn out really good, instead of lead or be intentional with our life and understand that we're going to have to every day purposefully be the person we want to be and do the things that we really need to do.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.